Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Googlepalooza. We'll be starting in less than a minute. Good morning, everybody. We want to welcome you to the music session for Googlepalooza. We're going to be talking about virtual and blended learning in music. I am Carmella Berthia, and I am joined by Leah Steffens this morning.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
So again, we're going to serve as your moderators. I'm going to introduce myself, and then Leah's going to introduce herself. I'm Carmella Berthia. I work at both Social Justice High School and World Language High School. I'm the choral director there, and I'm the modern band instructor there.
And I'm Leah Stevens. I am at Sor Juana Elementary on the southwest side. I teach grades pre-K to 4 music, and I'm also the arts integration specialist. And we'd love to introduce our panelists for today. We have Jenai Jenkins from Pritzker Elementary. We have Liz Limon from Marsh Elementary. We have Shemeka Nash from Morgan Park High School.
We have Victoria Rosario from Philip Rogers Elementary. We have Peter Elrich from Washington High.
And we have Leo Park from Northside College Prep, and we also have a jam board. So we would love for you to be able to be collaborative with us at this time as well. So you will also be serving as a panelist during this time. So thank you to everyone for being here this afternoon. Thank you to all of our panelists. And Carmella is going to tell you about the jam board.
All right. So yes, we do have a jam board that we will be utilizing for today. You can actually log in if you type in that bit.ly that we created. You should be able to log in there. Each one of the slides is labeled with one of the questions that one of the panelists will be answering. So if you have something that you would like to add for us to look at permanently, you can add it to that jam board, and it will become a permanent part of our presentation.
So with that being said, the jam board is only so big, and right now I know we have a lot of people on, and I'm sure more people will join. We have over 200 registrants for today, so please be succinct. It might get full, that jam board. Also, there might be a slight delay between StreamYard and YouTube, so please be patient if you post a comment or a question and it doesn't get up right away. But we do have a full session, so we may not get to your question, but on the last slide, we have contact information for everyone, email addresses. So if someone mentions something and you have a question for them, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and you'll be able to access this slideshow in the Googlepalooza session folder on Sched, or Sketch. I don't actually know how you say that.
It's okay. All right, so definition of blended learning. So blended learning is what we consider to be hybrid instruction. It has several different names depending on which district you're in. But the definition that we're going to be looking at right now is the one that we've taken from TeachThought, which just states that blended learning is an approach to learning that combines face-to-face and online learning experiences. That's basically what we're talking about doing if we end up having to do hybrid instruction. And then ideally, each online and off will complement the other by using its particular strips. I think in its purest form, that's what we're looking for to do with instruction. So when we're talking about blended learning or Hybrid learning, that's what we're talking about doing. All right. And also e-learning versus remote learning, because this was a big thing as we suddenly got thrust into remote learning in the fall. No, not in the fall, in the spring of last year. What is that? How is that different from e-learning? So I'm going to present how they were different as far as the districts went in the spring. So for remote learning, so this is based off of what we did with CPS in the 2019-2020 school year. Remote learning, we didn't have daily attendance, right? But there was an expectation of student engagement, teacher availability. There wasn't any particular logging of hours. There didn't have to be a certain amount of hours the students were getting instruction, but there should have been a minimum threshold provided. There were grading protections to minimize penalizing children with limited access to technology and supports. There was a number of hours per day provided for student work, and there were learning materials that were provided. The e-learning, everybody has a device. There's a daily record of attendance kept. Hours are logged. And students are provided a certain number of hours of instruction a day and a certain hour of work that is supposed to be completed throughout that day. And there are daily learning materials that are provided equitably to all students. It looks like some of the things that we're moving towards for remote learning, for we're labeling as remote learning in the fall, are actually falling more into that category of what e-learning looks like. So we'll be using those terms interchangeably, even though we're well aware that they've been used in definitive ways throughout different districts in Illinois in the spring. So we'll probably be using them interchangeably today.
So let's get to our panelists and let's start with the positive. So we'd like to ask a few of our panelists, what were the aspects of remote learning that went well? And in fact, I know for me, there were some things that went possibly even better than when we were face-to-face. So Liz, we're gonna start with you, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. All right, so for me, I've always wanted to do tech integration, elementary music, but it was very hard to get Chrome cards or iPads to the music room, especially during testing time. But during remote learning, we had the opportunity to do all of those tech things that I wanted to try, like Soundtrap and other interfaces. So that was something that was a positive for me.
Jenai?
Well, for me, I had always wanted to use online platforms, but never really was able to pay for them, honestly. So doing remote learning, I was compelled to use the music platforms that my students were able to engage with at home. And because of these, because we were forced to be at home, many of the companies, many of the educational programs were made available for free for a certain amount of time. Then because of that, then I was also able to talk to my administrators and tell them the benefits. Parents were able to respond. So I believe that going forward now, we will be able to use music platforms, music education platforms for students to use individually and at home.
And shout out to our administrators. I know we had some administrators registered for this session, so we'll be hopefully giving you some ideas and advice and for things that you can help your music teachers with this year. Go ahead, Leo.
Hi, everyone. Although maybe not so music specific, I kind of felt like the social emotional lens really came to the fore during spring remote. It was something that, of course, I was always very mindful of during the time in which we were teaching in person, right? But everything seemed more amplified in terms of really caring for our students during the spring remote time. And it really brought to light the significance and importance of continually keeping social emotional supports at the fore of our teaching.
And Shemeka.
I found that in terms of keeping an ensemble together and still keeping them to the point where they can still sort of play together or at least hear each other play, I found it helpful to break down my large ensembles into smaller ensembles. So this summer with my jazz group, I would have small ensembles before we had the large ensemble meet time. And I think the students enjoy hearing from each other and hearing how they're doing in terms of the SEL lens, but also just hearing them play for each other, I think was helpful.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we always want to start with a positive, right? I know there were so many things that went wrong or were frustrating about remote learning. So thanks for helping us get off to a good start here. So our next question is about the opposite of that, right? So we know that there are factors of face-to-face music instruction that really are irreplaceable in a virtual learning environment. So how do you all plan on addressing some of those factors? And Shemeka, we'll go ahead and start with you again.
So in terms of things that are irreplaceable, I think really being able to hear the students' actual tone quality, you can't replace that through video, because especially depending on the device that they're using. But I think that I don't think that I'll be able to replace it, but I definitely think that I will spend more time having them submit more video recordings, which I can talk about later. But I would use Google Classroom to help the students with their assessments and the reflections by allowing them to put it in a video of them playing their assignment. But I think I'll probably do more of that this year, just so I can really keep close track of their tone quality.
Victoria?
So a couple of problems that I kind of faced were synchronized group music making on some of these platforms is very difficult, especially since it's like a one mic at a time in Google Meets or Zoom, and the sound quality is not so great. And also the idea of what devices or internet connection, if unstable, that my students are using. I've talked to several music teachers about different programs that may work around that. I'm excited to use those. Some of us on here will be talking about those soon. And another thing is peer-to-peer interaction on Google Meets or Zoom was a little bit difficult. And I'm kind of thinking around how to address that this year, maybe doing some small group meet sessions so there's more time and interaction between the students. So we can do maybe peer assessment or things like that. Those are some things that I encountered.
Yeah, definitely those student-to-student interactions are some of the things that I think our kids are missing the most. So I'm glad you're deciding to address that early on. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I've been thinking about recently is just like, as we're, especially with beginning students, like, you're giving them a lot of physical feedback about where their hands are. And I know other music teachers are starting to think about like multiple devices to show multiple angles. And even I did stuff with audio interfaces with students and even just creating videos of showing them how to do that, but then it was still difficult for them to physically see. So I feel like that's kind of, and even just personal experience, the morning workout classes I do, sometimes the instructor is trying to show different angles on Zoom and he has to constantly move his camera, and it's not the same as being in person. So that physicality. And I think one solution is kind of what I mentioned, like you can log in on multiple devices to show multiple angles, creating instructional videos of yourself doing that, or, even having students create those instructional videos to give them some of the agency in demonstrating how to do that. And then, like Shemeka said, those small groups, so you can get more specific with those things.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen several of those videos where you've got, if you're playing keyboard, you've got your hands, you've got this angle, you've got that angle. So definitely having multiple devices is helpful if people have that in their repertoire of technology. Go ahead, Liz.
So I teach a mariachi ensemble after school, and I did not want to abandon them. I know a lot of people had to let go of their after school, but we lost that sense of ensemble. And something that I've been working on this summer, and we've been kind of working on in terms of a project for them to regain that, is a Final Cut Pro project where students record themselves playing a song or a piece that we're working on, and then I compile them, and it sounds like they're playing together. So that's something that will hopefully, restore that sense of ensemble. And I hope to do that for, some of my classes as well.
Leah?
So I'm primarily an ensemble-based music educator, and certainly the synergistic element that takes place during rehearsal and performance kind of went right out the window once we went remote. And that's certainly something that is virtually impossible to virtually recreate that in-person synergy. That being said, I found great value in as Shemeka had alluded to, and Peter, the idea of implementing more small group work. Certainly we do chamber music during a few months of the school year. That is the plan, but I'm really thinking about expanding sort of the types of small group chamber music experiences that my students engage in.
Yeah, it's really nice to be thinking about some of these things that we sort of do in our regular face-to-face instruction, but are sort of forcing us outside of our comfort zone, or maybe a little bit of different focus. So awesome. All right, so our next little bit of time here, we're just going to be going through some of the flexibility that we will need in order to think about this school year. So we've all done face-to-face instruction, unless of course you're a brand new teacher, and most of us have now done whatever version we did of remote or e-learning in the spring. So I think we can all probably agree that at some point this year, we're going to be doing some version of hybrid, and we're going to be doing some version again of e-learning, whether that's in the second quarter and the third quarter. We're going to have to be flexible. So we just wanted to be going through about some of the key considerations that we'll need for this coming school year.
All right, you guys. Okay, so some of the key considerations for hybrid instruction. You want to be thinking about what skills are best assessed for face-to-face. How will you handle singing or movement? Because, in-person instruction with the CDC guidelines and things like that, and then also at home, what you can see. How will students be able to work collaboratively when some will be in pods and some will be at home? Some things for safety to consider. What activities would be safer for students to do at home than at school? And what materials need to be individualized to be safe for students? Again, those are things that we're looking at even as other schools start to reopen across the nation, that those are considerations that they're having to make. So we need to be thinking about that stuff now. And then also time management things. So how can you make your work at school serve all students? So what parts of your lesson can you record so the students can rewatch it? And then what parts need to be done live and in person? What skills or knowledge can be practiced at home so that when students enter the classroom for their limited time with you, they can spend that time doing music? And how will you manage your formative and summative assessments, considering the fact that CDC guidelines and other district precautions may increase transition times when you're live and you're face-to-face? Okay. So some key considerations for remote learning, for instruction. What work can students do independently? What can they watch or listen to a performance? Can they read a short passage? What can they do asynchronously so that your time live can be more targeted? How will you support your ELLs and your diverse learners during remote instruction? Because they usually need extra support while they're in the classroom, and now that they're going to be away from you, how can you best support them and best set up platforms and other things that they're going to be using so that they are getting equitable instruction, and also distribution of materials. How will you or will you at all get instruments or materials to your students and rotate materials safely if needed? What will the collection procedure look like for those materials? And then also, again, time management. How will you develop procedures and routines for students who are new to your school or to your program? Or if you're in high school, students may just be rotating out into a new course. How can those routines transition back into hybrid or a full-time model?
And when I was thinking about some of those considerations that we bulleted out there, I was honestly thinking about how I moved from face-to-face instruction into remote learning. And for me, I have, mostly young students. So just trying to keep as many of the routines and procedures that we had in our regular classroom in remote learning. We always started with these songs, or we always started with this thing. So how can I keep that consistent for them, especially for our younger students, because they like routines. They like procedures, they like knowing what's coming, and also they like leading. At least my students do. So the CPS Department of Arts Education created a document, which we will link into the comments, and we will also have here in the slideshow. But they are the key standards that allow you to prioritize what to teach during remote learning. And so that's an Excel spreadsheet that we'll be sharing out. But one of the things that we're going to do right now with both an elementary and a high school example is to just take one of the standards and discuss how it would look with hybrid and remote. So the standard that I chose is a performance standard, and I'm going to read it because I know that it's small on the screen. When analyzing selected music, read and identify by name or function standard musical symbols. So for example, rhythm, pitch, articulation, and dynamics. Now, this is a 6th grade standard, so keep in mind I haven't taught 6th grade in a while, but I have taught it. And I thought about guitar because I know a lot of middle school teachers and a lot of middle school students are very interested in guitar. So when we do face-to-face instruction with guitar, right, they're learning how to read the chord diagrams, they're learning how to put their fingers in the right place, they're learning how to strum, etc. So when you're face-to-face with them, assuming you have the ability to get students on instruments in your classroom, they would be doing those things just like your regular teaching, except obviously you would need to have a system for how I'm going to make sure that this gets disinfected or that this instrument is only in this kid's hands, all of those things that we just talked about. But at home, they might be asynchronously finding songs with the chords that they learned. They could be annotating the difference between those songs. So are there extra chords? Are the chords there, but they're in a different order? Is there a bridge section with chords that I don't know? And then they can bring those song titles to school and play them as a class or in small groups. So those are just some possibilities for what they could be doing at home during the time that they're not with you. But if we're full remote, like we will be starting in September, they can be building chord diagrams using the Little Kids Rock slideshow, for instance. So and then if you were able to get instruments to them, they can practice at home. So Carmella, if you could go one slide down really quick, because I want people to know what I'm talking about there. So Little Kids Rock has these on their website. There's many PowerPoints on there for guitar, keyboard, ukulele, drums, and bass. And so that you can have them manipulate these, right? You could put it in a Google slide, it doesn't have to be on PowerPoint, and you can have them be writing these out so that they learn where their fingers should be going on the instrument. And then like I said, if they have instruments, they can be practicing at home. There's a ton of apps out there for them to be using. Most of them have free versions. Some of them have, unlock features with paid versions. 4 chords, ukulele. You could make a click track. There's a ton of Little Kids Rock videos, and they're always adding more. If you don't have instruments, you know, if they have iPads, if some students have iPads, they can be playing chords on the iPads, but you can also use body percussion. Some of our panelists are going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but there's found percussion. I know my students made actually really great double cowbells with pots and pans from their kitchens, but they can also be using their bodies, and they can be listening to recordings and annotating with what they think the strumming pattern is. They could be adding dynamics. They could be figuring out what the form is if they have the lyrics. I don't know about you all, but whenever I find songs online on different free platforms, the chords are always in the wrong places. They're never where they're exactly supposed to be. So figuring that out with students and helping them figure that out is a useful exercise that they would be doing if they found a song that they wanted to play.
Sorry, I'm muting my mic. Just looking at what you could do from a high school standpoint. So I was looking at the Illinois Music Standard presenting the final version of a personal composition or arrangement using musicianship and originality to utilize various compositional techniques and to convey expressive intent. I tried to keep it really simple. So for face-to-face instruction, students would submit and present their composition via Google Slides. Even though I know the students would be live and they would be in front of me, depending on what students will be able to do when they come, we don't know what that's going to look like right now, and students can barely talk or have conversations in school, so let alone perform something live. So students would still be presenting their compositions via Google Slides. So they would either record themselves performing a solo composition, or they would do that either at home or in a practice room, or they could record themselves doing something through a digital audio workstation, what you would really consider to be music technology. So using a program like Soundtrap or Soundation or GarageBand in order to make their own music using one of those platforms. So for that slideshow, the first slide would be student created liner notes about their musical composition that they've done. And in those liner notes, they would be able to talk about the final version of the piece that they would be doing. So they would be including the compositional techniques that they chose and an explanation for why they chose those particular techniques. And then on the following slide, students would upload a short video or a screen recording if they're doing something like a piece of digital audio software where you can actually see what they are doing on the screen, as opposed to just getting the track that they've made. And so they'll insert that video into the second slide. And then for the third slide, they would have a reflection on their project that they've done. Students who are at home will watch each student present their presentations, either live or asynchronously, later on, providing comments on their slideshow. And I would make sure that before sharing those slideshows out with kids, that I made them only viewers and not editors, so that they can't change any student's work. If we were only doing things remotely, then if students have instruments at home, they'll use those instruments at home. If they don't have instruments at home, then they can use notation software like NoteFlight, or they could use, again, like I said, they could use a digital audio workstation like GarageBand or Soundation to create an original piece of music. If they don't have instruments at home, like Leah was mentioned earlier, then they could also use found instrumentation if they want to. But any instrument that they have at home, and your voice is also an instrument. Students would record. They would record their screen as they would in the other presentations, and they would choose an explanation for why they chose those techniques. But the presentations would take place asynchronously rather than together through a Google Meet, only because I know for myself, when I have my high school students, a lot of my high school students are working during the day if they're remote. So I wouldn't have it necessarily set up where they would have to log in at a certain time to give that presentation. They would give the presentations asynchronously so that I can be flexible in my instruction. They're still producing the work, but they don't have to necessarily have to present at the same time.
Awesome. So we're going to go back. Oh, this is Carmella. Carmella, I'm stepping all over your slides. Go.
It's okay. So we're going to take a look at social emotional learning in the music classroom. So how will you create community, develop relationships, and support the social and emotional needs of your students from the remote position at the beginning of the school year? And this question is really, really important, especially I think as we work students towards becoming performers, because at the middle of the year last year, we were able to establish those relationships with students. So getting them to perform at home was a little bit easier, even though some of them were still afraid and may have been a little bit nervous or timid about performing even in their houses. So how do you build those relationships with new students, and so that they can feel safe in your classroom and they can feel like they can actually get up and perform? We want to start with Peter.
Yeah, I thought I was first. I wasn't sure. I think that's a really good point you bring up, and that makes me think about the survey that we always do at the beginning of the year and how we ask our students all these different questions to collect information about them, right? Like our knowledge of who our students are. And I've seen posts on social media lately along the lines of like, remember it's our students' homes, and talking about like how some of them were more comfortable at home. I also know that some students are going to be less comfortable at home, right? We have so many students that they're hanging out at school until 6 or 7 because they don't want to go home. And so like, what can we do just like from a level of collecting information that they're willing to share about, like, are you comfortable performing in home? And like, that's just something that popped into my head right now. The other thing I've been thinking about is creating like a collaborative Spotify playlist. In fact, I was in an earlier professional development today where one of the presenters did that, and I've seen a lot of people doing it lately. It's just a great way to create community, and you could do that in any classroom, right? And you could do it with any group of adults. Just go on Spotify, create a playlist, make it collaborative, have everyone add it to their library and choose a theme or topic. Or like, I'm going to borrow this from the professional development I was in today, like doing it as in terms of like a knowledge of yourself and creating something based on who you are, or a theme. I'm trying to remember, a topic that is dear to you and making a playlist that reflects you. That was Dr. Jared Scheel had that idea, and he was sharing it with us. And then the other thing that I've tried to do, last thing I'll say is with a summer project I've done, getting students to start a podcast for the school, and working with CAPE, which is Chicago Arts Partnerships and Education. They're all around the city. And getting some interfaces and then delivering those to the houses of students and interacting with their family, I think is a great way to build a relationship during all of this. And I'll keep it at that. Yeah.
No, those are some really great ideas, and those are some really great points. Shemeka?
So really quickly, with my jazz band this summer, we would do check-ins at the start of each meeting. And that check-in was basically, how do you feel? Another day could be, where did you want to travel if you weren't at home on the pandemic? Or how was your weekend? So I feel that, and I would use Jamboard for the check-in. So students could see each other putting their responses in real time. And once we did it the first few days, it didn't take a lot of time. It only took about a minute or two. But having the check-in at the start of class keeps the student, or gets them engaged, because they want to see their friends' responses. And it also helps me to remember and reflect on like which students are engaging during class. And if a student said they're not feeling well that day, or, when some of the looting or the rioting was going on, some of the kids were shaken by that. So if I would remember that from the Jamboard. So during the lesson, if they weren't as engaged, or if they weren't necessarily responding, or if they weren't playing as well as they normally would, I can remember, okay, they told me that they weren't really feeling it today. You know what I mean? So I really think that the check-in will help.
No, I definitely agree with that. I know that even last year when I had my students remote, we did something similar where we did a weekly journal, we did a weekly check-in with students, and especially as we moved into June, I think students really realized how vital that was for them to be able to have a catharsis and to express what was going on with them, and they really, really needed that moment. Before I move on to Leo, I know that some of the earlier questions were addressed, and we are going to probably try to come back to Alexandria's question. I did want to just very quickly, since we just stopped talking about what Michelle was saying here, Peter, do you know if someone has to have premium to make a collaborative playlist?
I don't think so. I don't know if anyone else has a definitive answer, but I'm fairly certain not, right?
Yeah, I know that I don't have it a premium, but I know if anybody else has that knowledge, please drop it into the comments. But I don't think that you have to have premium to
I know that you can see the playlists no matter if you have Spotify Premium or not. So even if you wanted to have the students tell you what their song title is, you could add it to a collaborative playlist.
Okay. All right. I see there's a lot of chat going on about Flipgrid, which is really cool. I promise you, we're gonna try to come back to as many of your comments as we can. I'll only stop right there since we had just finished talking about that a few minutes ago. And so, Leo, what are some of your thoughts about this question that we're talking about with social emotional learning? Uh-oh.
Leo, you're on mute.
Leo, you're on mute.
Someone was going to do that right during this session, and it happened to be me. I apologize. So to kind of piggyback on what Peter was mentioning, the idea of student curated playlists, you know, I think of music as medicine, right? And when we're talking about social emotional, I think about the musical elements. I'm sorry, the emotional elements of music, sonically, harmonically, melodically, so on and so forth. So to be able to tie our students into identifying music or musics or sound that connects with some sort of emotional kind of value, I think will be very important. You know, oftentimes, you know, you'll hear a sports journalist ask an athlete, so what's on your playlist when you're working out, right? Things of that nature. Or, you know, when I want to calm down, what sort of music or what artist or what composer do I listen to? When I need to be in a meditative state, what type of music or sound do I sort of find myself going to allow me to engage in that emotion as positively as possible? So the idea of music as medicine is something that I'm definitely going to continue to work towards in terms of gauging my students in connecting music and emotion with a little more clarity and understanding and maturity. Also, to piggyback on another panelist's comment regarding check-ins, just some of the check-in questions that I was asking my students during spring remote. One was kind of a checklist, right? Today I am, check all that apply. Some of the check boxes were happy, excited, sad, anxious, hungry, silly, tired, lonely, bored, overwhelmed, or other, where they could type in how they're feeling. And I asked them to give me some details as to why they're feeling that way on this particular day. I've always asked them, and this is all in the form of a Google form that students have to fill out. Another question is, how is your remote learning experience? How is your remote learning experience going? And that's kind of a checkbox as well. I'm on track. All my work is complete, all the way down to I've hardly done any. Another prompt is, today I am planning to colon. They fill that out in terms of their school plan. Also, today I'm planning to, and I asked them to list something fun and engaging that they're going to try and etch out some time for. But also I asked them if it would be helpful if any faculty or staff member checked in with them. So I asked them to check a box. Would you like a counselor or teacher or support staff or social worker or an administrative staff member? Would you like any one of them to check in with you for any reason? And then I asked them to name that specific faculty or staff person. And then I emailed that faculty and staff person and I loop the student in and allow them to connect for whatever reason, and then I'm out of it, right? If I'm not on that list as the teacher that the student would like to connect with, I simply just connect the teacher or the staff person to that student and let them do what they need to do. One other thing, I do this thing called Positive Vibrations, and there are a series of websites that we use, from Upworthy to Playing for Change to the Good News Network to Great Big Story, John Krasinski's Some Good News. We spend some time watching or reading an article, a positive article, and we spend some time discussing some of the beauty and good that people bring to this world. So with regard to the social emotional, those are a few things that are non-musical and musical that I've tried to bring into the classroom.
Those are amazing resources, you guys. Thank you so much for bringing those ideas. I hope that if one thing, comes out of all of this insanity with the pandemic, it's the importance of what our students need with regard to social emotional learning, right? Like, we can't just stop focusing on this just because we go back to school. The students will still need this. And I know some of the teachers that I remember the most are the ones that make you feel like you belong in their classrooms. So, that social emotional learning is such a key piece, especially when you've got such an intimate part of students, which is their voice and their instrument playing, and they put themselves out there. So they do need to be comfortable in order to do that.
But hold on, before we move on to the next slide, I do want to also just mention that there's something else that Leo said that was really, really key. I don't want anybody to miss it. He mentioned the fact that even though he cares about what's going on with the students, if he's not on that list of people who he wants, who they want to be their confidant, then he will move out of the way. And stepping out of the way is really, really important sometimes. Sometimes we have to not feel hurt that we are not the one to be their confidant. It's okay for them to, have somebody else. And as teachers, we got to work together to be a school community at this, period, but especially right now. Okay, sorry.
Can I just say one thing about what Carmella had just mentioned? What's nice about the back end, that is knowing that this student looks to this particular staff member, and now I know that, right? So if I notice something down the line that seems a little off about this student, I may not be the one to gauge that student. I may reach out to the teacher or the staff person that student had already sort of made known to me as the person that they feel most comfortable connecting to.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one other thing too, which is like this idea of when we start talking about social and emotional learning, and like we tend to think this is a music teacher specific thing, but I think it can relate to really any subject matter, is that we tend to think of like our knowledge in music, right? Or our knowledge in our subject area and how that's the only thing that we're really giving our students, and we lose sight of ourself. And like, again, I'm borrowing this concept from a PD I went to today, but like our knowledge of self in music education and who we authentically are in order to connect with the students socially and emotionally, whether it's with you or with somebody else, because everyone has to do that at some level. Like Leo was saying, like they're connecting with somebody else on that level, and just knowing where all the relationships are.
So we've talked a little bit about this, but materials are a thing, right? We have to acknowledge the fact that we are not gifted with hundreds of thousands of dollars right now to buy one-to-one instruments for everyone. Obviously, the biggest spending right now is going towards devices for students and towards internet access, but there are ways that I know I and a lot of other people figured out this spring to keep the students engaged with or without instruments. So we just want to address a couple of these questions, right? Thinking about, we're starting remote, so how are you going to keep them engaged without the use of instruments or movement materials, etc.? Or have you found a way that you can distribute certain instruments or materials to your students? Like I know, for instance, parents were coming to pick up learning packets. So are there times already scheduled into the school day when parents can come pick things up? And then how will this change if or when we move to hybrid instruction? So we're going to start with Jenai.
Okay, for my students, I really worked during COVID time in March, April, May, and June. I really worked to include movement in every lesson. I just wanted to make sure my small students, K through 4 students, got up out of their seats, did some moving at some point during every lesson. I also tried to use body percussion to get them to move with the music or respond to the music, especially our rhythm patterns. I did not make homemade instruments with my students last time, but that is something that I really want to do in the fall, because I really want all the students to have at least 1 or 2 instruments. And if they don't already have some type of percussion instrument, then I want to at least make sure that we try to make one for them to use at home. For my middle school students, I did distribute them if they did not take their instrument home when school closed for COVID. Then I did make the instruments available at the school, so the parents could go to the school, pick the instrument up. In a couple of cases, I did drop the instruments off at homes so that students could have their band instrument at home to practice. In the fall, because I did collect the instruments, in the fall, I plan to make the instruments available for students to pick up, or for parents to pick up from the building when they pick up any other supplies that they may need to pick up from school. So I'm really going to encourage the students to do that, especially my instrumental students in the band program, because I just think it's necessary. That's it.
Yeah, it's an essential part of what we do, and we don't want our programs to falter. We want to do as much as we can to keep those instruments and materials in kids' hands. Leo, go for it.
Once again, I almost forgot to unmute. So I was lucky in that I was able to at least during spring remote learning, to get most of my students, the vast majority of my students, their instruments to take home with them. I'm thinking that, again, we don't have plans yet from our admin in terms of how orientation is going to go for high schoolers, but I'd imagine they're going to set up some type of system that allows students to come to school to pick up all of their necessary school materials. And with that, I certainly will be putting together packs or kits, what have you, with their instruments as well as their method books and other accessories. Over the spring, I think there were 3 students who did not have their instruments, and we worked some things out to get them instruments. I will be just as flexible this coming fall for students who are unable to pick up their instruments from school. I did have some students actually swing by like the parking lot of the school during the spring. I would meet them to replace strings or to give them a stick of rosin. I think this fall I'm going to be asking my administration if I could set up kind of a drive-through, instrument repair accessory pickup day in the parking lot, maybe once every couple weeks. So any students who need to come through to, again, get their instrument tuned or get their fingerboards retaped or to grab another stick of rosin can do so. Of course, doing all of this in a very responsible manner, right, in terms of physical distancing, in terms of ensuring that the instruments are clean, so on and so forth. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question. I'm having trouble seeing the questions on the screen right now, but hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's, at least from what I see, I belong to several different Facebook groups and I get emails from everyone that I've ever purchased anything from ever. And I know that there's a lot of guidance from West Music and Remo, et cetera, about how to disinfect their instrument. How are you handling this? So I would encourage people to seek those out, and we can probably throw a few of those into the slideshow and into the chat as well. Shemeka.
So for beginners, I'm not going to distribute any instruments until we're, I guess, back in the hybrid situation, because I just don't want to have the repair bills that will come with giving beginners instruments and taking them home and not seeing them right away. So no instruments for the beginners. The advanced students will have like the same situation with Leo. So again, this summer, I delivered like a pandemic pack, with reeds, extra ligatures, neck straps. So I put together things in a Ziploc bag, got the brass players and stuff that they needed, kind of try to make sure that the slides weren't stuck real quick before I left the student. But I did have to drive around to drop those things off for the summer just to make sure that we were straight. But and then in terms of like things that I'll do with the beginners, I definitely will use flat to reinforce other theory compositions that we're working on. Flat, you can see the students create their compositions in real time, and you can edit their compositions. If you don't know about flat, I can send you a presentation that I did last week with some other educators. But anyway, I use flat, and I like to use Soundtrap because we can collaborate in real time on those things.
And I think you're right. I think that's what makes Soundtrap really, really valuable. That's one of the things that I like about Soundtrap better than Soundation, is that you can collaborate in real time on Soundtrap. So I think that that's a really excellent way to start off the year. I'm going to try to make sure that I do display some more comments. But yeah, but no, it absolutely is a reality that we're all not able to take instruments home, and that there are things that you do have to kind of figure out outside of the normal day-to-day situation that you would have in your classroom throughout the year. Because when I did elementary, I'm doing high school now, but when I did elementary, I had maybe 30 or 40 instruments for 1,000 students, literally. And how does that look, outside of the classroom? So you do have to make modifications to your instruction. So maybe we won't be doing this year just because we just don't have the resource or the ability to be able to do it. And, also for the safety of instruments. So I think that that's a really good point. Nithya, I hope I pronounced it right, but we're going to take a look. We'll probably take a look at this at the end, and we'll kind of ask that again at the end. So if you are thinking about that, if you have any background information about that panelist, then just kind of let us know. So our next question, and I know that some people are going to have to log out in a minute because maybe you have a session coming up next. If you don't have a session coming up next, you're welcome to sit on with us and stay on with us, though.
Actually, I think we're the last session.
Oh, great.
But I do want to honor people's time, so I wonder if you want to skip ahead to the virtual goodie bag, and then we can come back, like explain what that is for people that have to leave, and then we can come back to this question. Does that feel right?
Okay, got it. So let me skip to the last few slides on here. All right, so There are a few companies that were really helpful in the spring that are also trying to help us out in the fall. So one of those being Tone Savvy, which I'll kind of talk about later on. But Tone Savvy is basically an assessment platform. It's mainly music theory, and then there are also things if you have an orchestra program where students can kind of take a look at their fingering, and same thing with guitar, and with piano, they can label the piano keys. But it's mostly music theory, but it's a great way to be able to track student progress and to be able to, so you can see how many attempts they had to make. It's asynchronous. Students work at their own pace. You can really, really kind of make sure that those lessons are detailed and that they are made for the student that is actually using it. They have a 30-day free trial, but they will extend it to be a 60-day free trial if you mention that you are from Googlepalooza, and that's from the guy who created the program. So he was kind enough to do that for us. Also, Sight Reading Factory is offering a promo code for Googlepalooza, CPSEDU20, and they will give you 20% off and $2 for student accounts. The Sight Reading Factory is a sight reading exercise generator where you can customize. And actually, I know that you're not on here, Shemeka, but I know that you're more of an expert with Sight Reading Factory than I am. So you mind talking about that really quickly, and then we'll kind of go back.
I used Sight Reading Factory for a little bit because I got smart music subscriptions a few years ago, like around the same time that I had discovered Sight Reading Factory. But anyway, you can they do have a free trial, but the good thing about Sight Reading Factory is that you can put a short exercise up on the screen so that everybody could. So if you were doing choir, for example, everybody could sight read at the same time. Especially when you were in the classroom, you could project it, but you could still do that here. On smart music, you can't really blow the music up as large as you want to on a screen sometimes in smart music, so that could be a benefit. But smart music does have sight reading things that you can have or implement in their program as well.
Okay. All right. So those two are listed. I'm also going to be listing a link that I'm using for another presentation that I'm doing where for Google Meets. So there's a Google Meets extension that will be also offering a percentage off, and it's like an all-in-one Google Meets extension. So I'll be adding that link into the goodie bag as well. So we're gonna go back now, and we're gonna continue on from where we were. I believe we were here. All right.
Yes, talking about family partnerships. And I apologize. I'm apparently like terrible at copying and pasting links that look like anything. I swear most of the time it just does it for you and it doesn't look like gobbledygook, but the YouTube isn't doing that for me. So I'm sorry. Somebody asked for the prioritized standards and it's that long sharing link that I just threw in there. Okay, because it is a Google Doc. So parents and families are such an important part of what we do. So we wanted to ask about ways that you all have found to engage families during this time. And I know that I think it was Christopher in the chat gave a great idea about giving a do's and don'ts list, or just ways that parents and families can respond positively to students singing, because it is singing and playing is such a personal thing that you do. So I wanted to ask the panelists some other ways that they found to engage families during this time and helping support teachers as they especially help young students, but also our high school students learning in the fall. So we're going to start with Leo.
As primarily a performance-based, ensemble-based music educator, I understand the integral nature of building community. Yes, of course, process is absolutely important to what we do, but product is as well, right? Inviting the community, inviting the families to our fall performances, winter performances, spring performances, to solo and ensemble, to contests, so on and so forth. So the tricky thing for me has been thinking about how I can continue to gauge the community and family members, particularly as it relates to performance, right? So I'm planning on doing virtual chamber music and solo recitals throughout the school year if we're in a remote pattern for the vast majority of this year, which I believe is significantly possible given the circumstances. Also, I am planning on inviting guest speakers to not only interface with my students during class, but to have these types of arts talks or music talks in the evening hours virtually, where I could invite, let's say, Charles Mangini, the former president of Vandercook College of Music. He has actually come to speak at our school before. It's been a number of years, but he's just a very well-spoken individual who speaks to the values of music making. Now more than ever, given the fact that we're connecting virtually, I feel like these things are much more feasible, you know, as opposed to inviting someone to drive out to the school. Now I can ask them if they could hop on some sort of virtual platform and present to my community of students and their families. So I'm trying to think really outside of the box to invite musicians, professors, all sorts of people who are kind of at the front of music. I think that's going to be really important to what I do this coming school year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about, you know, it's actually sometimes easier in remote learning than face-to-face, and being able to just pull up somebody on Zoom or on Google Meet and have them have a chat with your kids is a great opportunity to get them engaged with actual musicians and people in the arts. Shemeka.
So I still go with parent phone calls also, especially when it's time for not the final concert anymore, but the final project. So this summer we did a project launch party, if you will. So our jazz band students made like a music player website, if you will, and each student had their own channel with the compositions that they created over the summer. So we did like a launch party, and I invited the parents because via email, electronically, but I know that some of them are getting a lot of email these days. So I tried to make sure that I called those parents that I know would just sort of like check out on email, and to make sure that they know to go and check out the website or join them, you know, and come on and see if they can just join us on the site to check it out. And then I think also we do virtual field trips, and I to keep the parents invited, they can, if someone already has like a YouTube of their studio available, then I can share the same YouTube channel that we're going to be just checking out ourselves in class, but just to invite parents and know that they can still learn a few things with us.
Thank you. Jenai.
Oh, and I wanted to speak on the volunteer clearance. In terms of like the studio thing, I would always just go with vendors that I knew were already approved. So I knew people that were already approved, and I would just have like a virtual field trip with them. So you can check out like the Jazz Institute, or really still use that art look map, because I know that Ingenuity is still working really hard to get some guidance together as well for the fall, so that all of those arts organizations can still have residencies. So don't forget the art look map, because all of those organizations are still approved.
Yes, go ahead and throw that in the chat for us. And Jenai.
Okay, so one of the challenges I had in the spring was to get my primary kids logged into the site, the music education platform that we were using. So I decided to contact parents and ask them to join the class, voluntarily join the class, and communicate with other parents. So parents that had already figured out how to log in and help their child log in were able to talk to parents that were having trouble. So it was not just me communicating to students and parents, but the parents were able to communicate with each other and share their strategies for how to maneuver, registering their child on a particular platform. So just parents communicating with parents really helped me.
Yes, outsource that, because I'm sure that, they could use an extra set. You could use an extra set of hands, everyone, right? Being able to have an extra person to help out. And then, I feel like whenever I say reach out to me, parents are like, yeah, I would rather not. I would rather just figure it out myself. But another parent, they definitely will feel more comfortable doing that.
Sorry, you guys are trying to figure that out. I wasn't trying to make my face super big. I wasn't trying to have you all just look at me like that. So, going on to the next one, we're going to take a look at culturally responsive teaching, so CRT. So I will go ahead and I will read this very, very quickly. And then I want us to just have a quick conversation around culturally responsive teaching. So in reality, culturally responsive teaching is less about using racial pride as a motivator, and it's more about mimicking students' cultural learning styles and tools. These are the strategies their moms, dads, grandmas, and other community folks use to teach them life skills and basic concepts long before they come to school and during out of school time. All right. So things you want to look for: identity achievement, validating students by embracing their culture. That's very, very key. Surveying, continuous feedback, and inviting them to be leaders. And then yes, that's a line that I highlighted from earlier. And then also wanting to understand that culturally responsive teaching leverages the brain's memory systems and information processing systems. And that means that their primary ways of knowledge transfer and meaning making are oral and they are active. Okay, so you might notice that you have more students who are actually auditory learners or are kinesthetic learners than just visual, or that they are a combination. I know even myself, I am probably what I would consider to be an audio visual learner because I learn best when I have both. So understanding those things and understanding how culture plays a role in those modes of learning. Okay. Leah, do you want to talk a little bit about the make learning sticky, and then we're going to keep going?
Sure. So I think the whole idea of culturally responsive teaching is that you are responding to the students who are in front of you, and really getting into what and how they learn, and being able to use the strategies that will help. I really liked this phrase about helping make learning sticky, and how we can use, obviously music for that. That's why we still know the ABC song, etc. I can recite to you the Pythagorean theorem because it was in a song. Have I ever used it? No, but I could sing it to you and I could write it out. So we just want to keep those things in mind. And so as we are moving forward, go ahead, Carmella.
All right. So how will you address the importance of delivering a culturally responsive curriculum within the context of both remote and hybrid/blended learning? So we're going to take a look at those. And all right, so Liz, do you mind starting us off?
Sure, that's fine. So during the last remote learning session in the spring, I had students make a playlist on SoundCloud. So I wanted them to use their own music knowledge, their own music bank, to learn how to navigate Soundtrap. So students were to pick a song, record 30 seconds of the song, and then speak about the music as to why it speaks to them, and why the artist is so influential for them. That way, we're doing a little bit more than just give me the song and that's it. You're connecting with the music. You're telling everybody, why you like this music. And who knows, somebody might learn something new about this artist or the music. So that was one way that we kind of went into what they already know, their own music bank, while still learning this new program, this soundtrack.
Okay. No, yeah. So Soundtrap is, and it integrates really, really well with Google. So that is a great resource. Liz, thank you so much for that. What about you, Leo?
To piggyback off of Liz, the whole idea of sampling and sample-based education, the idea that Liz talks about 30 seconds and learning about the music, speaking about why the music is connecting with them. As I try and filter this through like a string orchestra lens, which is very kind of Eurocentric, right? At least that's what we all think. I think about how I can take like a sample, let's say, of what a student suggested and somehow reconfigure it or invite them to reconfigure it in a way that hip hop producers might reconfigure or recontextualize a sample, right? So let's say they take elements of, I don't know, a no-name track, right? They take a little bit of the elements, they figure out how to break it down on their instruments. And then, earlier I spoke about the importance of small group work that I'm going to be engaging my students in throughout this remote learning time. The project might extend into them taking those sample pieces from that no-name tune, using their violins, violas, cellos, and basses, as well as maybe found sounds, and recontextualizing that no-name piece into something that's now their own.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really, really good idea, and that's a really good point. I remember PBS had a really good series on the Beat Making Lab where they did a whole series on taking found sounds in different countries and having local artists to create products with those things. So I think both of those ideas, the idea that Liz gave and the idea that you just gave, really, really work together well with that. I'm going to find a link to that, and I'm going to add that to the end of the hyperdoc, as well as for what Liz was saying. There's also some things through Teach Rock that also start to extend through the sampling piece. So, and I'll add that to the hyperdoc as well. All right, and we are going to have Shemeka also kind of give us a little bit of feedback on how she would handle this situation. Thank you, Shemeka.
I always have like a residency with one of my ensembles. So I think this year I'm going to try to get a composer residency. And again, just using the vendors that are available, I'm going to try to really see if I can do that, because I know we're going to spend much more time composing this year. So that's my really quick short answer.
All right, Donna, thank you so much. All right, we are going to continue on to the next question. And that wasn't Dorothy before I hand it back over. Catherine, I'm going to make sure that I also include the book that you mentioned in the comments at the end of the slideshow for people to look at later on. So whatever resources and things that you post, we'll make sure that we get those out to everybody else. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Leah.
Yeah, so I know for me, grading became a huge ordeal, and I'm, notoriously a procrastinating grader. But it just became so much harder when I couldn't assess kids like 4 at a time or in group work. So what were the challenges for you all? How did you overcome those challenges of assessment and grading just being one piece of that? And also if you have any ideas about how to help students execute quality recordings. And we're going to start with Victoria.
I clicked to another screen. So I used a variety of different things for assessment. One thing that I found was very useful for each of my lessons is that I made an exit slip using Google Form that I would give to my students. And it was just like a 1 or 2 questions, just an immediate way for them to respond about what they had learned, and also for me to see like trends in what my students were picking up or not picking up, things that I knew I needed to address for the next time. And it's really easy to link to your Google Classroom and to Google Meets. It makes its own spreadsheet. So I found the use of Google Form was really great. Other things, let's see, what else did I say? I don't know if people have used this, but I would use a Google Meets where it was just myself in the Google Meets to make a tutorial video on how to use technology. So I'd set up a Google Meets, start recording, and do a tutorial for my students. And I plan on using this to teach them how to record at home for the fall, and give them some tips and resources to use. I didn't really do a lot of recording in the spring, but I'm hoping to use it this fall. And I found doing that made the use of tech a lot more manageable for my students. So just a few things that I did. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the Google Forms, like that's something that I utilize a lot with the after school program. And I used it with my even my younger students, because it's really easy for them to just type in a couple of words or click like through a multiple choice thing. And they're super easy to create, and you can create a template and use the same one every time and make a copy of it. So definitely a great idea there. Shemeka.
So before the pandemic, we were already submitting video to Google Classroom for their summative assessments. And then also for some of their formative assessments where they were doing like a group composition, or they were doing little chamber music. They would also make a video in Google Classroom and just upload it to that assignment. I didn't use Flipgrid because I just didn't want to hear any complaints about it's not working, or I don't know how to do this or that. It was just much easier, especially if they had a Chromebook and they were signed in on the Chromebook. That's key. If they're signed in, they just turn on the camera and they can play in class, or if they're at home, they can play. And then it saves to the drive, and you can just upload it to the assignment a lot easier. So I just use Google Classrooms and upload video for that.
Awesome. And then Miss Jenai is going to talk about Pear Deck, and I know that she used it a lot for check-ins and assessments. So take it away, Jenai.
Okay.
And I think we need
I did use Pear Deck. Yes. Pear Deck was super, super helpful for engaging students in real time, and also for formative assessment. So I'm just going to take you through 5 steps that will help you to get a good idea of how to use Pear Deck, how to set it up. So you do need to be in Google Slides, and if we could get to that, if you could click one, yes. So here's the first step. You need to be in Google Slides and just create a new document. Once you create the new document, you click on add-ons. So there should be an arrow. If you click one more time, Leah, there will be an arrow to show you where the add-ons is. If you've never seen that, that part of your menu, click on add-ons, and then you choose Pear Deck. If Pear Deck isn't there, then you have to click on Get Add-ons, and then you will see a whole list of add-ons that you can use. So Pear Deck is the one you want. Choose Pear Deck, and then we can go to step 2. Once you choose Pear Deck, you will have the option to open Pear Deck in your slide presentation. So once you get to this step 2, you can choose a number of different types of questions. The questions will be similar to forms. So you can use short answers for your students to respond to. You can use multiple choice. Some things that are not part of forms and just very unique to this, you can choose a number question. So if the answer is a number, then your students' answers will be displayed in a number line, and then they can see how their answer will compare to other answers that are submitted by students. You can choose a draggable response. So if you want to use a map and have your students identify certain countries on a map, they can drag a dot to identify Italy or France or something else, and then you can see your students' answers in real time. You can also record an audio for students to listen to and then respond to. Maybe you want them to identify a rhythm, identify which rhythm is played. You can record an audio for students to listen to. And finally, you can also attach a website that students can then embed in their own device and interact with it. So these are different types of questions that you can include in your Pear Deck. Okay, so now let's go to step 3. Once you have all of the questions created, then you want to invite your students or start a lesson. Once you start the lesson, you will copy and paste the link into your chat bar. If you are in a Google Meets, this is how we usually use Pear Deck in Google Meets. So you would copy and paste the link in the chat bar. And then this code that you see, the big, bold 5-digit code would show up. So the students need to have that code in order to access the Pear Deck. So you start the lesson, you copy and paste the link into the chat bar, and then you also copy and paste the code in the chat bar. And let's go to step 4. So for step 4, you can choose if you want your Pear Deck to be teacher-led or student-led. So I usually chose the teacher-led platform so that I could control the slide that the students would see. There was one time that I did choose a student-led version, and that was just so that the students could spend extra time. They had to maybe write a story or write a short script. In that case, they needed more time. They needed to be able to work at their own pace. So I chose the student-led platform. So once you choose student-led or teacher-led, then you are able to start your Pear Deck, and we can go to step 5. This screen shows you an example of what the teacher dashboard looks like. Once you have all of your students in, then on the left side, you see the screen that you are using to present, the screen that you're on, the particular slide that you're on. And the big square in the middle, that shows you the students' responses. So you don't see any student responses right now because there's nobody in the class, but that's where you would see all the student responses. They would be private only to you. The students will not see each other's responses unless you choose to share your screen. So there is a way that you can show their responses, and you can also make their responses anonymous. So the students don't necessarily have to know who's saying which answers. And so that's how you use it. 5 quick steps, and I hope that was clear.
Yeah, this is super helpful. And I just want to point out that this is something that everybody in CPS has. It's free, and it's just an add-on to the Google Suite. Is that right, Jenai?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah, so a great way for you to do a check for your students, a quick informative multiple choice or whatever.
Can I also say one thing about grade transfer? I'm not sure if you guys know that Google has, or I should say Google Chrome has provided an extension called Grade Transfer, where you can take your grades from Google Classroom and dump them right into Aspen. So they are going through an upgrade right now. So it's not necessarily accessible right now, but it's very, very helpful in the spring. And they are working to roll out a new and improved version for the fall.
Awesome. Yeah, when you told me about that the other day, I wanted to go back in time and have a knowledge of that. So because that would have made my life so much easier. just wanted to let everybody know we only have a couple of more questions, and I'm so happy that so many of you are still here with us. We have like still over 60 people, so thank you for spending this extra time with us. I hope that you're finding it valuable. We're going to move on to talking about the finished product, because while I know that the new Illinois standards and the new core art standards have more subtly emphasized the process, because that was such a part of our music education historically that was, left out. Of course, we are still producers of music. It is still such a necessary thing for the continuation of our art form. So we will, I'm sure, be moving to a hybrid model at some point this year. So how do you all plan on handling performances? And I put that in quotes, right? What is that going to look like? And how are you going to balance the importance of these students having a satisfying musical experience with the necessity of keeping the students safe? So Shemeka, would you start us off?
All right. So in terms of like actually performing at school, if we're at the hybrid model, I'm not going to do any performances at school until like the spring. So if we are still on the hybrid model, I'm going to have to do everything differently. I would have like one spring concert with all the bands on it. Now I know that I'd have to have multiple concert start times so that there are less people in the auditorium, have to do smaller groups. So I would have to reformat the way that I do everything in terms of like actual in-school performance. But then while we're still remote, I'm going to do things like I did before, like just try to make it as flashy as possible. Like just saying like we're going to have a premiere or we're having a launch party and we want everyone to come to the launch party of our music video or whatever it is that we're doing, and even have it where we can have a countdown till we have our video uploaded so that people are as attracted as possible and will want to sit yet in front of a computer screen for a few more minutes just to check out what's going on.
Yes, awesome ideas. It's amazing how much of our job is marketing when we never really got a class in that in school. Leo, can you answer this for us? How are you plan on handling your performances at all, if you are?
Yeah, so in remote learning, we'll definitely do small chamber music stuff. Obviously, I'm going to have to stitch that stuff together. I've gotten to know DaVinci Resolve pretty well, which is a video editing tool, as well as an app that my wife uses quite often. It's an app called PicStitch, which allows students to record, and then I take them and I put them together. But there's also this new web application called Cyborg Llama that I need to spend a little bit of time on because it's supposed to allow students to be able to connect with each other and work towards a small group performance. But yeah, putting all of that together will be great and will allow me to, host these virtual performances. But I'm also going to be spending more time on the comprehensive idea of musicianship. So I'm thinking a lot about informances, virtual informances. So my students will be performing their chamber music pieces or their small group pieces, but it'll be prefaced with presentations that they will have curated and put together. I'll probably be having them use Adobe Spark to create their presentations, again, so that those who are tuned into the virtual recital can learn a lot more about the composer, as well as a little bit of the musical analysis and the process that the students took in terms of learning the music, preparing it, refining it for performance, and then of course transitioning to the actual performance. So really thinking about the informants, which I've always for some reason associated with like middle school, junior high. I don't know why. That's just a ridiculous sort of way of thinking, but that's what I'm looking at. If we go hybrid, I think I would be comfortable doing live performances, but again, it would only be in trios, quartets, quintets, with the ensemble members somewhat physically distanced. Again, I'm primarily strings. I feel for you band and choir folk because, of course, there are certain elements that are kind of concerning with regard to respiratory droplets, so on and so forth. So that's what I got for you.
Well, I think the idea of the informants is one that's so important and really helps, you know, the watcher really understand about the process. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think our parents really appreciate when they get sort of a sneak peek behind the scenes of like, what does it actually look like to put something like this together, and hearing where it started from. And also it's valuable for the students too, right? Your idea of like having them do a little bit more research on the composer, that shouldn't just stay with them. That should also be shared with the audience, and more than just program notes. Okay, and Liz had something to add to this question as well.
Hi, so we have several assemblies, we call them assemblies at our school, throughout the year, including things like we have a Black History Month assembly and trivia session. So that's a tradition that our schools had for years, of doing things where students are learning about a topic and then you know, talking about it or presenting about it. So once we get into hybrid, I think we'll be able to do something like a live stream assembly where classrooms can tune in without having to leave, you know, without having to move around. And then everything obviously would have to be coordinated digitally or online. So I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about what it takes to live stream something in good quality and all of that. So that's what we're looking for this year.
Thank you so much for that. I'm in the same boat with you. I'm really enjoying that aspect about being remote, with being able to share the finished product with more people and for it to reach out to more people. I think it kind of even plays into what Leo was talking about earlier with the PD thing, whereas, you know, you can invite people in who you wouldn't normally be able to fly in or have drive in. They can easily access us because it's online and it's digital. So yeah, definitely. I think that we all need to do as much work as we can, even if we go back, even if things somehow certainly become normal. Doing more research into how to create a quality project live through streaming. All right, and we're going to take a look at our final question, and then even after our final question, after we're done, the live stream will be going on for a little while, so I can display some of your comments on the stream and the Jamboard. But for digital resources, what are some of the best digital resources that you use during remote learning, and how did you implement them? I think we talked about a lot of them. But if there's something that we missed or that we didn't quite mention or get to, what are some that you use? And we're going to go ahead on, and we are going to start with Victoria.
So I used a couple of things. I mean, I used Google Meets, Google Classrooms, which that was when we went remote. It was my first experience using any of these platforms, so it was a lot of learning immediately. So I do recommend YouTube, and I don't mean for our students, but for a teaching tool or teacher training. If you're interested in using some kind of tech that you've never experienced, chances are there is a teacher or someone who has used it before and made a tutorial video and put it on YouTube. I recommend that because it helped me get through so much tech learning in a very short amount of time. I used Chrome Music Lab. I used the Kandinsky for my very young students, and I found a whole lesson on the Kandinsky, an artist, and why they made the Chrome Music app for that. I used Breezing Through with my middle school students. Breezing Through Theory had a free term during remote learning that was, I mean, usually it's kind of a little expensive for teachers, but you can ask your principal to pay for it or your administration. But it was very helpful during remote learning. You were able to track your student progress, and I really enjoyed using it. Those were some of the things that I used. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much. Peter.
My mouse was all the way at the other side of the screen, and I had to bring it all the way down to the mute. I don't know if that's happened to anyone else yet. But yeah, I wanted to kind of connect the last question to this question. And one thing working with CAPE this summer that we did was they had a project page, and I think that's included towards the end in the slides. They used the Bulb app, and you're able to, I saw somebody earlier, I think it was Mark, said in the comments, like create like a portfolio describing the project. And within it, you can embed documents that you use, that you had students fill out. You can embed videos, you can embed all these different things that you did as part of the project, and it serves as a real narrative of the work you did. And the thing that it was more work at the end for me, but I'm like, if I ever did this again, I could absolutely just document it as I went along, and it would be less work on the back end. And so I really enjoyed doing that process with them and documenting that as a different way of like presenting what you've done. Like if it's not a performing ensemble class that doesn't have a performance, that might be something that I would use to communicate to the parents, is what I'm starting to think of. Like, here was our process, here's what we did do, and some of the documents curated online there. And then along with that, the other big thing I used was Soundtrap to compile and collaborate and all those things. And then, like I said, YouTube.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I meant to say something about that before I moved on to you, Peter, but no, absolutely. YouTube is probably the best how-to site that you can use. So to what Victoria was saying, if there's anything that you missed in any of the PD that we've been doing, that we'll be doing this week, go to YouTube, and it's there. Liz.
So something that I've been using, along with some of the things that Victoria and Peter mentioned, like Chrome Music Lab, Soundtrap. I actually also use BrainPop. Most of our CPS schools have subscription to that. If you don't, they have some really great lessons on world music and great ways to assess students and do any kind of assessment that way. It integrates really nice with Google Classroom, so you can check that out as well. It's called BrainPop. On the teacher side of things, I mentioned earlier that I made a video of our ensemble playing together. You've probably seen them before. Everybody gets their little square and you sync them together. If you're a Mac user, the easiest way to do that is with Final Cut Pro. And Apple does have those Pro Tool applications at an educational rate. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask me. And then I actually use one of our school's iPads, and I plug it to my Mac, and the kids can see my screen. So if I use an app on the iPad, they can see it and hear it using QuickTime. So I use QuickTime and the iPad together to show them anything on there.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
My mind is blown. I need to do that. How did I not know about that?
No, that's really smart. I didn't think to do that either. That's really smart. Jenai. Oh, can't hear you.
Okay. I use quavermusic.com for my pre-K through 5th grade students. It is a really just full encompassing type of website. It provides a full curriculum. Lesson plans are included. And so they already have a full curriculum for pre-K through 5th grade, but then you can also, as a teacher, you can upload your own. You can have students videotape themselves and then upload their video as part of an assignment. You can grade. You can create your own quizzes. You can create your own games within this. So music, that's quaveringmusic.com. It also has videos that that are provided to teach certain concepts. It's just a really, really amazing platform. It's maybe like $200 per grade level, but you can have an endless number of students. So something like that. Also, I did not use Music First and Music First Junior in the spring, but I plan to use that in the fall. I attended a PD of Music First Junior and Music First over the summer and found out that this particular site includes a lot of different platforms. So they include Noteflight Learn. So they include the paid version. They also have Soundtrap, Aurelia, which is an oral skills platform. They also have a sight reading component and Musician First. So it includes a theory component. So they have, I guess, partnered with a lot of different platforms and included them in one. And then you can just pay one fee to get whatever you choose. So you can pick and choose which platforms you want. You can include some, just a few or more, and then you just pay for whatever you want. And the prices are pretty reasonable, sometimes like $5 to $6 per student, but there is a 50 student minimum. So $5 to $6 per student per platform, like per program. And sometimes the fee is even less depending on what the platform offers. So that's Music First and Music First Junior. So Music First Junior is for the younger students, and that is $399 for like kindergarten through 5th grade for the whole year for everybody. It's one fee. So I was able to use Donors Choose to have parents and community members pay for that subscription for me. So that is already paid for, and I'm super excited. It was paid for in like 3 days. So $399 for pre-K through 5th grade. And then for Music First, what I explained with the sight reading and Noteflight, that is going to be a little bit more, and I'm just going to try to get my administrators to support me in that. So, I mean, I believe what I chose for 75 students, it's going to be about $1,600.
No, that's right. I think that I believe. No, I was just going to say I believe that they have a I think they also have like a 30-day free trial as well.
Yes, they do.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, so those are definitely good platforms to check out right now. Music First was the name of that platform, Maria. And we're going to put more links and websites after the goodie bag on the slide. So check the slideshow again tomorrow. And because I'm going to be constantly adding things in based off of what you all have said and based off of what presenters have said. So things are going to be added in to the end of the slideshow. So our slideshow will become a hyperdoc. So you can basically access everything from there. And then, of course, like I was talking about earlier, Tone Savvy is also giving you a 60-day free trial for their platform if you if you contact them and let them know that you attended the Googlepalooza session. So don't forget about that, and please make sure that you utilize that as well. Leo, and then Shemeka.
Sorry about that. Like Peter, it took me a second to find the unmute button. So let's see here. Smart music is something that my students and I have used for several years now. During remote, smart music will be relegated to like method book work, etude work, so on and so forth. So individualized work. Music First is definitely something that that I'll be subscribing to, specifically to use Soundtrap and No Flight for composition and production work. Cyborg Llama for small ensemble work. Of course, all the Google Education apps from Drive to email to Google Presentation, so on and so forth. Adobe Spark for students to be able to create presentations online. In terms of teacher-created presentations, I subscribe to Powtoon. And then, of course, with video editing software, DaVinci Resolve is my go-to. There's a free version that's pretty powerful, and you could use it on both PC and Mac. I think that's about it.
That's so well. So thank you. All right, and then Shemeka.
In terms of free things that I use the SongMaker portion of Google Music Lab because they can actually save the composition that they create. And also, I think a lot of people don't realize it about the SongMaker portion is that you can use it with really younger students because I have a Sistema program that I work with also, and I use it with 3rd and 4th grade students. But in the settings section of SongMaker, you can change it so that they're only creating with like less than 1 bar. You can change the key. You can just limit it to the pentatonic scale only. You can limit it to quarter notes only. It doesn't have to subdivide up to 16th notes or 8th notes. But I have a video if you want to know how to really use SongMaker with any grade level. But the key is when you go into SongMaker, make sure that you go to the settings and you can change it and do a lot of things with that. So and then students can at the end choose to download a MIDI file. So with my students that were using Soundtrap, in terms of how I use it with the older students, I will use SongMaker first by setting the bars a little bit longer, changing the key, and sort of already putting in the rhythm for them at the bottom so that they can get used to really thinking about how a digital audio workstation functions. And then we went to Soundtrap so they can try a little bit more to create rhythms using the drum machine, things like that. And then we would use loops as well. And then other thing free. Don't forget that on Smart Music, they have free content on Smart Music. So Sound Innovations Book 1 for band and orchestra is available. If you want to use Smart Music without having student subscriptions, they can still sign up. You'll probably need a teacher subscription so that you can actually like assess it. But the students can still practice with Sound Innovations for free on Smart Music without a subscription. And they have other free content available. But I think Sound Innovations, in my opinion, is probably the best free thing that they have available. And then the metronomeonline.com, not Metronome Online, but it has a metronome, tuner, virtual piano. It's a practice log. So I found that helpful because it's a whole bunch of things in one. Again, this is not all for the same class because I teach 7th through 12th grade. So I use different things with different grade levels. I use Screencastify to make the how-to videos that I'm talking about. So they have a free subscription up to like 5 minutes per video, but you can also pay to make longer video. I use Jamboard. And then in terms of like paid things, I use Breezing Through Theory. And some parts of it are more like middle school, junior high, but the more advanced lessons I did use with my jazz band, they do have things on the blues scale. And they do get into some more advanced things, even though the interface looks childish. But I did use Breezing Through Theory 7th through 12th grade. It's just the older theory lessons are for the more advanced students. And obviously I use Flat. Flat is $2 per student, but there's also a Flat add-on, which is free, but you have to access it right now through your personal Gmail account because it's not on the whitelist yet for CPS. And there's a video that I put in the current presentation about how to use the Flat add-on. And I think, if anybody wants to get a hold of the other video that I've made, or you just email me, because I'm not sure of how to put the links in the comments to it. So just email me. That way I can make sure that I send you what you're interested in. And I think that might be best for me.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think that stands for everybody who's on the panel. If there's something that you want to learn more about, I know some people, a lot of you guys had questions for Shemeka, and I saw some questions about some of the projects that Victoria was talking about. I've seen questions about everybody's presentations on here and everybody's comments on here. So if you want further information, please do reach out to people individually on here, and I'm sure that people are more than happy to give that information. I don't know if there is anything else, or if anybody has anything else that they want to say before we head on out.
We really appreciate everybody that stayed to the ends today. Thanks for giving us the time to get through a lot of these questions, because I know that we're all going to be up against this in the next couple of weeks. And so hopefully this has given you a lot of new ideas and new tech tools and things for you to be able to think about and implement.
All right, you guys. Well, if you want to log off, you're more than welcome to log off, but definitely in the replay, you'll be able to see you can take a look at some of the resources in the Jamboard. I think people are still writing, so I'm not going to add that on right now, but you're more than welcome to take a look at the Jamboard, and you're more than welcome to take a look at the comments that people have posted, and to gain ideas and to gain just to pull from the wealth of knowledge that we have in front of us. But thank you so much, and we appreciate you, and you guys have a great day.